I should have known it was going to go to shit when I saw her car parking next to the ranch gate, looking like she was about to unleash wahoo just because she saw an overturned bag of feed on the ground. The woman got out with her clipboard under her arm, an unnecessarily large handbag, and a notebook that looked more like a ticket book, handmade from accumulated anger. It was a Monday. The sky was clear. The sun was just right. My horses were calm, and the cattle were resting in the shade. I just wanted a bit of peace after a weekend of visiting staff, reviewing the security system, and organizing DEA paperwork. Things that would seem boring to anyone. But to me, that was normal. Tranquility with natural air conditioning and the smell of bush. Until she showed up. She had already been showing signs of an outbreak. She'd sent a note complaining about the color of the wood in the fence. That's right, the color of the wood. Another time, she said that the pasture was visually and emotionally polluted. But that day, she decided to go further. She left the world of notifications and went out into the real world on her own 2 feet, as if she owned every square meter she could see. She entered through the side gate. I knew she was going to try, so I left it unlocked on purpose. I wanted to see how far her courage would go. Lo and behold, she went far. She walked around the grounds as if she'd been given a guided tour. She took pictures of the entrance to the stall, the stable, the barn. She stood at the barn gate as if she were inspecting the place for the next episode of some compulsive control reality show. I approached without haste, with a hat on my head, a bottle of water in my hand, and a look like I was counting the minutes until I lost my patience. She saw me and pretended to be surprised. "Oh, hi. I'm just doing a quick check. The HOA has received some complaints about visual irregularities." Visual irregularities? Yes, she was trespassing on private property because she thought she had aesthetic authority over the countryside. I kept quiet. I waited for her to continue because I knew the show wasn't over. We have a new external inspection program, you know, and some residents have reported sounds, suspicious sounds, and unconventional movement. She was talking about the trucks from the DEA team that had come at the weekend, but of course, in her mind, that was a sign of an illegal hay trafficking operation. I explained that she was on private property. I asked her to leave. She ignored it. She kept walking, talking as if she were presenting a documentary. And here we have an unregulated rural storage structure. This needs to be approved by the visual committee. It's just a recommendation, of course, but you know how the rules are. That's when I locked the gate. I turned around, walked to the main gate, and closed it. Padlock on the latch. The woman stood inside, looking at me as if I had committed a crime. She raised her clipboard as if it were a shield, and, without thinking twice, she pulled out her cell phone. "I'm calling 911. This is a kidnapping. You can't hold me here." She started screaming into the phone as if she were in a drama episode. I'm being held against my will on a rural property, surrounded by suspicious structures. Yes, there are animals. Yes, it looks like an undocumented operation. Yes, I want you to come now. While she performed her act, I just watched, not with fear, nor with anger, but with a cynical calm that only comes when you know exactly who you are and know that the other side hasn't figured it out yet. There she was, yelling at 911, unaware that she had just activated a police response into a property under DEA jurisdiction. When she hung up, she turned to me with that triumphant look of someone who thinks they've just saved the world from a rural villain. "They're coming. Let's see what the law has to say about this weird ranch." The only weird thing there was her, but I let her. I wanted her to see for herself, because what was coming was going to make her scream, choke in her throat. The time between the end of her call and the arrival of the police was short, but long enough to watch the spectacle of self-confidence turn into unease. She paced back and forth, measuring the paddock with her eyes, scribbling in her notebook as if she were preparing a dossier. When she passed the barn, she frowned as if she expected to see some illegal activity coming out of the window, as if the ranch were a cartel operation and not a regularized rural space with more documentation than the condominium where she lived. The woman even tried a diplomatic approach after the call, as if the proximity of the police gave her a position of advantage that she could use. She said that, depending on her attitude, she could avoid a bigger scandal, that perhaps it would be a case of reconsidering conduct, reviewing structures, and collaborating. A theater of false goodwill staged by someone who had just trespassed on private property, made a lying accusation, and continued on territory that didn't belong to her, acting as if the world were a condominium under the supervision of her questionable sanity. While she was spouting phrases copied from the HOA's forced etiquette manual, the main gate opened. A local police car pulled up. 2 officers got out, a county veteran who looked like he'd seen it all, and a rookie who still bore the naive glow of someone who believes that every tip comes from a real place. She ran towards them. Literally ran. She opened her arms, pointed at me, and started pouring out a string of disconnected phrases about kidnapping, irregularities, obstruction, and a crude criminal structure. I could see that the veteran had already detected the smell of madness. He just raised an eyebrow and calmly asked if she could please wait on the side while they checked the facts. They came to me. There they were, with that more serious, standard approach. They asked for my name. I gave it. One of the officers looked at the system in the car. The screen lit up. He read the data, and his face fell into a mixture of surprise, discomfort, and instant respect. The veteran came closer, lowered his tone a little, and said, "Sorry to bother you, officer. We didn't know it was federally protected property." She called to say she was being held against her will. I nodded. He said that she broke in, refused to leave, and started making recordings from inside the area, that everything was recorded by the security cameras, and that the agency's internal department had already been notified. The younger agent's face changed color instantly. The older one just took a deep breath, already anticipating the damage the situation was going to cause. I called them both into the barn. I showed them the DEA identification, the safe where the sensitive records of the operation were kept, and some of the documents proving the legality of the property. No illegal activity, no strange movements. On the contrary, a ranch that serves as a secondary base of operations, with the express permission of the federal government. We went back outside and she was still talking to herself, fiddling with her cell phone as if she were recording a documentary about the fall of American morals. When the 2 agents approached her, her posture changed. She straightened her spine, smiled with superiority, and asked, "Well, I hope you've sorted it out. This place is completely out of order." That's when the veteran replied, "Ma'am, you're being summoned for trespassing, false reporting, and interfering with a federal facility." Her expression froze. Her eyes widened as if the words had been spoken in Russian. She tried to laugh, to give that cynical little laugh that only works when you're in control. But it didn't work. The laugh died halfway through, choking on the impending humiliation. "No, wait, that's a misunderstanding. I'm from the HOA. This is a community living area." The officer just replied, dryly, "No, this isn't. This is DEA monitoring territory, and you're in a serious situation. You'll need to come with us to explain yourself." She began to shiver, not from cold, from despair. The woman who until 5 minutes ago had called me a disturbing visual element now had sweaty hands and a trembling cell phone in her hands, desperately trying to find a plausible justification for her own stupidity. They said they weren't going to handcuff him. Not yet, but they asked her to go with them voluntarily, or else the procedure would be different. She accepted, staggering like someone who had just fallen from a jump into a hole she had dug herself. She got into the car. She sat quietly, and for the first time, there was no reply, no comment, and no clipboard. As the gate closed and the car drove slowly down the dirt road, I looked up. The sky was still blue, the same sky as before, but the air was lighter, as if even nature had gotten rid of an allergy. The news of the scene at the ranch didn't even take 3 hours to spread like fire through dry straw. First, it came in the form of a whisper in the HOA group. That woman was taken away by the police after a disturbance at the ranch in the upper part of the neighborhood. In less than an hour, they had already added drama. She tried to arrest the owner of the ranch and ended up in jail. Another 20 minutes, and people were swearing that she had invaded a military base and was being interrogated by the FBI. The neighborhood's collective creativity was as fertile as the land she tried to regulate with rulers and snobbery. However, what they didn't know, and what would soon come to light, was that this suspicious property was actually a facility in the custody of the DEA, one of the few places in the region with an active federal license, operating at a reserved security level, and that the kidnap victim, who called 911 in a fake panicked voice, in fact, deliberately invaded a territory with clear signage, ignoring signs and disrespecting limits that not even an ill-bred child would cross. The neighbors, of course, were divided. Half pretended that they had always known that the ranch was protected. The other half began to review everything they had ever said, posted, or commented about the place, because now they knew they were dealing with someone who not only knew the law, but was part of the structure that enforces it. The woman, on the other hand, had to deal with the worst sentence she could receive at that stage of her life: public humiliation without remedy. After the official police notification came the administrative hearing. The HOA, desperate to extricate itself from the embarrassment, issued a clumsy statement saying that it does not authorize unscheduled inspections by its representatives and that it disapproves of individual conduct that compromises community harmony. It was a cold, almost cowardly text, which basically said, "This crazy woman acted on her own. Get our name out of this mud." But it was too late. One of the residents leaked a printout of an email in which she, days before the episode, asked for informal authorization to visit properties that visibly clashed with the aesthetics of the neighborhood. The email used words like rustic subversion, visual fence misalignment, and rurally hostile behavior. The last part sounded like something out of a satire script. It became a meme. From then on, her name became synonymous with ridicule. At the market, no one would talk to her anymore. At the beauty salon, they booked a haircut and canceled at short notice. At the local coffee shop, they stopped writing her name on the cup. They started calling her a complaint customer. And the worst thing wasn't even that. The worst thing was the silence from her own family. Her husband didn't show up for any meetings. Her children disappeared from school events. The house, once adorned with seasonal banners and HOA posters, was now a dull beige square with closed curtains and a burial atmosphere. Meanwhile, the ranch became a point of interest. Not one to visit, of course, but one of respect. No one dared approach without an invitation. The jokes still came, but they were loaded with a new kind of reverence. It was as if everyone now knew that someone lived there who didn't need to shout to be heard. One Saturday afternoon, one of the members of the new HOA board showed up. He said he wanted to review the relationship between the community and the special properties in the area. He was carrying a basket of jams made by his wife, a dull smile and an apology tucked between the strawberry and apricot jars. He said they were reviewing the association's processes, that a lot had gotten out of hand, that there had been overzealousness, yes, but now they wanted to establish a channel for dialogue. I said that dialogue had always existed. What wasn't there was respect. He agreed, a little awkwardly, and said he didn't know the ranch was so important. He left feeling lighter, with the feeling that he had done the right thing, but with the look of someone who understood that you don't go in there with arrogance, nor with a clipboard. The woman, for her part, remained locked in her silence. She walked past her neighbors like a shadow of her former self. Her firm gait and perky nose gave way to quick steps, staring at the ground and a constant attempt to disappear. Even the leaflets she used to hand out were gone. All that remained was the echo of her authoritarian tone reverberating in streets that were now finally at peace. Time passed, but her shame lived on as if it had just happened. The neighborhood, which had once treated her orders as unwritten laws, was now moving in the opposite direction. People who barely looked the neighbors in the face began to chat at the gate, comment on the weather, ask about the family. Her suffocating presence seemed to be the last weight preventing the neighborhood from behaving like a real community. The HOA, now under new management, revamped everything. Rules were revised, events were organized openly, and, most importantly, it became clear that no one would have absolute power over anything. What had previously been a regime of clipboards, spreadsheets, and punishments was now a modest, participatory, almost friendly association. They even started planning a collective barbecue in the park, something that would never have passed her strict, acceptable noise filter. On her side, nothing had changed. Or rather, everything changed inside, but outside, the scene was the same. House with locked gates, curtains always closed, car leaving only at strategic times. The neighbors, who used to lower their voices when passing by, now passed by laughing loudly, on purpose. Children, once forbidden to ride their bikes on the sidewalk, now used it as an improvised running track. Their parents let them, as a kind of symbolic revenge. The ranch followed its rhythm. Cattle grazing, horses calm, activities monitored, all within the legality and silence that only those who don't need to prove anything can maintain. The affair with her? Closed. The investigation proved the invasion, the false accusation, and the attempt to manipulate public authority. She wasn't arrested, but she received a hefty fine and had her name involved in a process that prevented her from taking on any role in residents' organizations for at least 5 years. The most striking thing, however, was neither the trial nor the legal punishment. It was the new sign at the entrance to the HOA headquarters. A simple wooden board with a phrase engraved in small, razor-sharp letters. No good intention justifies going beyond someone else's gate. The phrase had no name, but everyone knew where it came from. There was a day, in late fall, when she showed up at the monthly meeting. Yes, she had the courage. She arrived in a discreet dress, with low shoes and her hair up. No makeup, no clipboard. She sat at the back. She didn't say a word. No one interrupted her, but no one called on her either. The new HOA president just nodded and continued reading the agenda. At the end of the meeting, an elderly woman, who always stood next to her during votes, approached with an expression of calm disappointment. Not anger, but deep disappointment. She said just one sentence. "You could have been part of the solution, but you chose to be the problem." She nodded. For the first time in years, she didn't answer, nor did she try to justify it. She just left the room, leaving behind a silence that was now her sole domain. She never again tried to organize an event, call a meeting, or meddle in other people's affairs. She remained there, living like a discreet shadow. The neighbors started calling her the one who learned late, not meanly, but as a warning. A reminder of what happens when ego speaks louder than common sense. As for the ranch, it became a legend. It gained respect. People now used it as a benchmark for balance. Do the same at the ranch, they said. When they wanted something fairer, calmer, more sensible. Some teenagers even made a t-shirt with the phrase, "I locked the door and she called 911," and wore it to neighborhood parties. It sold more than any item at the old administration's craft fair. In the end, she became what she feared most, irrelevant. And the ranch, silent as ever, maintained its role, not just as a physical space, but as a living lesson. The border she crossed without permission became the definitive line between abuse of authority and the right to live in peace. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.